Good morning, I am not Christine Walker. But Christine and I decided to make it a bit more texty because I was coming. She said, would I lead the service and she will do some of the readings and preach. The subject of today's service is friendship. But it's also the service when we need to be thinking about safeguarding. About safeguarding vulnerable people, children and adults. And I think it fits very well with what I happen to know Christine is going to say. I won't say any more about that, but I'll say something at the end to help us think about safeguarding. Like a chalice now. Let's just think about our friends, particularly our vulnerable friends, people who could so easily be exploited. And let us recognise our responsibility. Our responsibility to those we love, our responsibility to those who at some level are not capable of caring for themselves. Our responsibility to ourselves to nourish and foster friendship. So this light shines in the darkness of this time of year is a sign of friendship.
So this is a reading from the prophets by Johann Hebron, and it's on friendship. And a youth said, "Speak to us of friendship." And he answered, saying, "Your friend is your needs answered. He is your friend, which you sow with love and reap with thanksgiving. He is your board and fireside. For you, come to him with your hunger, and you seek him for peace. When your friend speaks his mind, you fear not the nay in your own mind, nor do you withhold the I. For when he is silent, your heart ceases not to listen to his heart. For without words in friendship, all thoughts, all desires, all expectations are born and shared with joy that is unfeigned. When you part from your friend, you grieve not. For that which you love most in him may be clearer in his absence, as the mountain to the climber is clearer from the plain. And let there be no purpose in friendship save the deepening of the spirit. For love that seeks aught but the disclosure of its own mystery is not love, but a net cast forth, and only the unprofitable support. And let your best be for your friend. If he must know the ebb of your tide, let him know its flood also. What is your friend, that you should seek him with hours to kill? Seek him with hours to live. For it is his to fill your need, but not your emptiness. And in the sweetness of friendship, let there be laughter and sharing of pleasures. The dew of the little things the heart finds its morning and is refreshed. So I gave this talk originally just before Easter, Holy Week actually. But when we were invited to join you today, we did originally think that the theme was child protection, and so I thought this begged repeating. So the significance is that it was written at about the time of Easter, and you'll see why that's important and why child protection is important as I speak. Do forgive me for reading it, but it is quite, for me, it was quite a complicated story to try and tell, and it involves various people and going backwards and forwards in time. So rather than confuse myself, I've written it down. So I had two quite dramatic experiences, and They moved me to reflect on the nature of friendship, the meaning of friendship and the qualitative nature of it and what it meant to me. Now, if you go into a card shop, and I did, for the purposes of preparation for this, it was quite easy to find lovely words describing and celebrating, and up to a point, idealising friendship. For example, a friend is someone who understands your past, believes in your future, and accepts you just the way you are. Or a true friend accepts who you are, but also helps you become the person you should be. And if you do a brief internet search, as I did, looking for friend quotes, you find, I cannot even imagine where I would be today if it were not for that handful of friends who have given me a heart full of joy. And let's face it, friends make life a lot more fun. And all of this is probably true. But isn't it too neat and too easy? One of the most moving lines in literature, for me, is the final sentence, you'll know it, in Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, as the character Sidney Carleton goes to the guillotine in place of his friend, and he says, "It's a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It's a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Now that's fiction, of course, but we also know that men, and I searched it, it is always men, awarded the Victoria Cross, have all demonstrated valour and self-sacrifice and have often given their lives for their friendships. Friendship, as we know, can be less straightforward and messy than the cards and the glib quotes lead us to believe. It can demand sacrifice and effort. Now, Hollywood has made very successful films about complicated, loving and challenging friendships. I thought of The Shawshank Redemption, The Wind Beneath My Wings, Thelma and Louise, Midnight Cowboy, Forrest Gump and Finding Nemo. And we can all identify with the struggle and conflict of friendship, but is there always a happy ending? So, friends and friendships sustain us, and without it, we're usually lonely, depressed, and anxious. And we know that one of the most important indicators of longevity is to have friends. And one way to maintain mental health is to have friends. But what if you discovered that one of your friends had been a spy? And for years, acting for an enemy agent and had necessarily lied to you, because it happens. If, on the other hand, in his essay about humanism, Ian Foster said, "If I had to choose between betraying my country and betraying my friend, I hope I should have the guts to betray my country," because he understood that friendship and the love that it brings can be stronger than one's sense of duty. So, it seems that we need our friends. They bring us joy, help us to bring the best in us, keep us healthy. They may betray us, they give us counsel, they stand by us, they sacrifice for us, and share our memories, or sometimes let us down. Now, when I was a girl, because of my father's job, he was a soldier, we had to move every 2 or 3 years. We had to pack up. We had crates probably about the size of the dimensions of this table. Everything we owned had to go in there. My brother and I had to share one. So we pulled up roots and we had to start again, sometimes on the other side of the world. And that was hard. And we learned quickly that making new friends was imperative. And that became a lifelong skill. But unfortunately, we also had to learn how to let friends go too. When I was 11 or so, I made a great friend in Hong Kong. She was called Louise Harkins, and we were inseparable. for about 3 years. We were like peas in a pod. We spent all day together at school. We were in the same classes for everything. We spent weekends and holidays together. We did each other's homework, and I remember that we giggled all the time. Now, neither of us had desperately happy home lives, so we sort of saved each other too. We were two girls at the start of womanhood who truly loved each other, and our friendship sustained us. Interestingly, I can't remember the first time we met or the day we separated, but for the last 50 years or so, I have missed her terribly. Now, I also have another friend I want to mention. Her name's Helen. Now, I met her about 7 years ago at Heathrow Airport. She lost her suitcase, and as it transpires, that's not unusual about her. But as it turns out, it was with her husband, Tony, who'd taken it with him when he'd gone to get them coffee. Now, it wasn't a random meeting. We were part of a group travelling to India as part of a leprosy mission volunteer group. We were all speakers. They were invited to go and see firsthand the hospitals we were raising money for. So I spent 3 weeks with Helen. We slept in the same room together. We ate together, and we talked a lot about our families, our past. We cried together, actually, at what we saw, and we shared internet repellents. And we started conversations that we carry on today, usually via WhatsApp. Now, clearly, Helen adored her husband, Tony, who'd gone off with the suitcase. And there he was when we landed back at Heathrow, ready to take her back to the south coast. And my husband, Paul, actually became quite exasperated when I waxed lyrical about the devoted Tony and how he'd remotely saved Helen's photos from India to the cloud and sent us warnings about heat stroke, and how he'd travelled for hours from the south coast to meet her on the plane. Got myself home. But since then, we've got to know Helen and Tony quite well, because we've been several times to their home, and they're delightful hosts, entertaining the children, putting us up, Tony sharing his Bacardi with Paul while analysing the cricket. Anyway, back to Louise. On Facebook, there are pages dedicated to British Forces schools abroad, where old boys and girls can post old black and white photos of year groups, and you know the type, rows and rows of children sitting cross-legged with teachers time and messages that usually start with, "Does anybody remember me?" Because of course, people need a connection with their past, confirmation of their memories, and a chance to reminisce. A sense of being important to someone is important. And I look at one of them, and I've rarely seen anyone find anyone of their past, and I've never recognised it. Till a few months ago, when I recognised a small picture in black and white of the dear friend I lost 50 years ago. There, with her trademark hairband, was Louise. Now, what should I do? Should I send her a gushing message? Because it was an old post, so would she get my reply? And could I bear it? I didn't mention it to anyone, because it would be devastating if she didn't answer. Or worse, if she just said, "Oh yeah, you were in Hong Kong." So I sent a nonchalant message, a brief post, along the lines of, "Oh, hello Louise, I think you might remember me." And I went out. We went to a ball, actually. And when I came home, I looked immediately at my phone. It was after midnight, but there was a message from Louise. She'd been looking for me for years. She'd been on Ancestry UK to find my mother's maiden name, and on records to see if I'd married. She'd written to the secretary of the school reunion group and emailed anyone who might have known my father's regiment. I found a background. Now, the day after this wonderful virtual reunion, I received a message from Helen. Tony had been arrested. Police had come before dawn. They'd They've taken all the computers. I haven't told anyone else, she said. I don't know what to do. Now, I just want to say at this point that police only usually seize computers in case of serious fraud and particularly heinous moral crime. It wasn't fraud. I had to read the message several times before I grasped what she was saying. I was stunned, and that's a word that we use and misuse, but I was stunned and in a state of shock. My poor lovely friend, who was hundreds of miles away, was enduring one of the most dreadful things imaginable, but I couldn't go to her. What could I say? So slowly after I had assimilated the information, I began to feel rage. And to be honest, I just wanted to go and punch him. It takes time for things to make sense when everything we thought we knew doesn't happen to be the truth. I began to think about how Helen must be feeling. Her husband of nearly 50 years wasn't the man she thought she knew. More than that, it turns out he has an evil streak in him. And things became even more complicated for me when Helen said things like, "We will get through this and be stronger." Because I wanted her to be outraged and damning. I wanted her to leave him and let him face the consequences alone. But of course, Tony was not only her husband, but her best friend. And I realised that one of the reasons I love her is because she's one of the most loving and compassionate people I know. She's the best friend her husband possibly had. She, of course, is suffering. Her world will never be the same. At the time, she and Tony were barely speaking. She doesn't know how their friends will react when they eventually tell them. There'll be a court case and possibly a custodial sentence. And she feels stigma by association, and she has a lot of anger to live with. Now, 50 years ago, when Helen and Tony were getting married, Louise and I, in Hong Kong, were being best friends. So my friendship with her is as long as Tony and Helen's. Now, it turns out for the past 20 years, Louise has been living not 50 miles away. She's in York. And she's arranged the flowers in the church where my family are. And her husband comes from Middlesbrough. So we arranged to meet halfway in Thirsk. And of course, there were questions, but I didn't like her anymore. What if she turned into the sort of person that I would never be friends with as an adult? What would we have to talk about? How would I cope with the disappointment? Because memories are precious, and that's all we have. So I sent her a message, what if we don't get on with these? And she said, well, I just had that conversation with my husband. I think we were friends for a reason. You're a nice person. Of course we'll get on. At first, I walked right past her in the garden centre. I saw a small woman, hands clasped, concentrating hard on the begonias. But as soon as I looked at her, I saw her mother looking right back at me. 3 hours later, they were still talking. She giggles as much and laughs as easily. And we filled in the gaps in each other's memories. And we realised that over the years, it was highly possible that we could walk past each other in the street, in Stockton, in York, or Scarborough. Now, I belonged to Anne Amateur Dramatic Society when I was in the play, and it was a particularly long one, and I'd asked Louise to come. She'd asked to come, and I wanted her to, but she would have had to travel from York, and she would have got home after midnight, so I said not to bother. So she said, I've missed you for over 50 years and we have a lot to make up for. Of course I'm coming. I booked the tickets. My questions about that friendship were, does it last even if you don't see each other or speak? Will it be the same for a new friendship? Or will it be a continuation of the old friendship? Can you be friends with someone you don't agree with? What would the lines of acceptability be? What if Louise was lovely, but a racist? Well, she isn't. And out of the way, I was willing to risk the grief and the disappointment for the sake of, and in the hope of, friendship. Now, I started talking about a card shop and we end in one. I usually send out a few Easter cards, and this year, in the card shop, I smiled because now I was going to buy one I'd never bought before. Louise made me very happy. But what allowed Helen in turn? Because I usually send their Easter cards. I couldn't just send one to her because that would be too painful for her. And I didn't want to send one to him, to them, because I didn't want him to think for a moment that I'm his friend or that he's in my thoughts. But it was an Easter card, it wasn't a holiday postcard. And I had to think about why I celebrate Easter, because, well, it's a time of hope and remembrance and gratitude and sacrifice. Personally, I'm not sure about forgiveness. I don't really know what it is. I've read a lot about it and contemplated it often. But whatever it is, I'm not the one who needs to give it to Tony. I don't know how Helen feels about that. It's a conversation she needs to start. I'll wait until she's ready. But I doubt the victims of his crimes will get any confession or contrition from him because they're anonymous. So both Helen and Tony are taking up counselling, so that's a start. And I'll continue to be a good friend to Helen, as good as I can. Louise and I are having lunch again soon. She's already spoken to my mother on the phone, and we're determined to make the most out of our friendship. That, as it turns out, is the same one that we've had as girls. Now, as for the Easter card, at the time of writing, I wasn't certain. But I did send one, and I sent one to both of them. And I immediately received a message from Helen with deep, deep gratitude, saying how very much it meant to both of them. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but that's the status quo. Finally, just interestingly, Helen's receiving counselling from a group called the Lucy Faithfull Foundation. Now, the Lucy Faithfull Foundation was established by a woman called Lucy Faithfull, the first social worker to be elevated to the Lords, and it's the only charity that exists solely to support and protect survivors of childhood sexual abuse. The other interesting thing is that Helen is one of 6 women in her counselling group. She's the only one who stayed with her husband.
So I just wanted to add an addendum to that, which works on the notion of safeguarding. And Christine talked about child protection. I know safeguarding is broader than child protection, but I think it fits for all of that. We racked our brains after the first time Christine and I talked into the night about whether we had seen signs from Tony. And of course, we stayed with him often enough to know that he did some irritating things. He sometimes spoke harshly to his wife, but I don't think I ever saw a sign, no sign of that. But the reason I'm stood in front of you here, in a way, as a Unitarian, is something that happened to me through the Church of England. I don't want to go into this in any great detail, we've had a long talk. But my successor in the church I ran in Sunderland, actually, whose name I can tell you is Kevin Conway, I started to get messages from my old congregation saying they were very worried about the way he was behaving with a 12-year-old girl. He seemed to be overly friendly with her. And I remember thinking, well, I'm sure it'll be all right, it's nothing. And the messages kept coming, and I kept saying, look, I've left now, nothing to do with me. I wash my hands of all of this. And Kevin ended up, was arrested and went to prison for the abuse of that girl. And I have reflected long and hard on my refusal to face what I was being told. It's why I left the Church of England, and in part because of the way they responded to that. But the main thing I want to do now is to say, people were seeing evidence. And of course what happens is they don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe what they're seeing. And so they convince themselves, we convince ourselves, there's nothing to see here. Now, the chances are, on average, there was nothing going on. There is no harm in just asking a question, going to someone and saying, something seems wrong here. Now, we don't have children in this congregation, but everyone here, for different reasons, might be vulnerable. It may be to do with age, it may be to do with abilities, disabilities, or maybe people come in here who are vulnerable. And there's all sorts of ways that other people can exploit them. I work for a mental health and learning disabilities trust. And I spend a lot of time with very vulnerable people. And I would much rather somebody ask a question about what they've seen in my behaviour, because I'm confident I'm not doing anything wrong, but I can see how something could look wrong in all sorts of ways. I have, as you know, I brought in here Sam with Down syndrome. There's an incredibly vulnerable young man, and I would much rather somebody say, why are people behaving to Sam like that? Even if it's nothing, than just saying, no, I'm sure it'll be all right. And I think that's the message of safeguarding. We're all responsible for something we feel uncomfortable about. And to ask a question is not to accuse, it's simply to protect. And it's to protect a friend. So let us pray. I was just reflecting on friends who are living together in Gaza. We've heard today about how friends can help each other, how Carol King can sing You Can Friend. Let's just think of those who can do nothing for their friends. But watch. Watch injuries that can't be healed because there's no anaesthetic. Think as well about people on the other side, friends who watched each other be massacred by Hamas. Let's just reflect and hope that somehow there can be some rapprochement, maybe not friendship, but acceptance. Let's reflect and pray for our own friends, particularly our vulnerable friends, those who need us, those whose lives can be much better if we could just give them a little bit more time. And reflect on our need for friends, that quiet need that we never dare express because it makes us sound needy. And let us reflect on that element of Christianity which says, what a friend we have in Jesus. And let's say his words. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. And so let us leave this place in the spirit of friendship, leaving our friends here behind and going to our friends out there in the community. Thank you.